And we're joined by our first guest tonight, Rowan Allport, Deputy Director at the Human Security Centre. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, has Ukraine got all it wanted from this informal summit in Prague?
It's a bit of a mixed bag, really. I think they've got most of what they wanted in terms of authorization to use the weapons they've been given by the West on sort of targets in Russian territory. Obviously, the US has put caveats on that in terms of the types of weapons they can use and where they can use it. But the vast majority of NATO members have signed up for that. Importantly, I think it's the important point, I think, though, is that the NATO members like the UK and France that have actually provided long-range deep penetration weapons have signed up for that. So that's very important. Ukraine will no doubt be disappointed that, as I suspect they expected, they're probably not going to get a formal NATO membership invitation at the forthcoming summit in Washington, D.C. But again, I think they are they can appreciate that, and they will sort of gladly accept the compromise, which will probably be a sort of a steady pathway and a steady ladder to bring Ukraine close to NATO, while still not engaging in a sort of a formal accession process. Mm-hmm.
With these caveats in place, do you think there is enough weaponry to help the situation in Kharkiv as of now? Do we need to wait certain time for the weapons to reach Ukraine, or is the weaponry there basically on a border ready to be used?
I would imagine it's probably set as a little way back from the front line, but I'd imagine that they've sort of been expecting this to come for the last few days and weeks and are prepared to move quite quickly. So I wouldn't expect that much of a delay. In terms of the percentage, in terms of sort of the mass available, I don't know, frankly. I think it's very tightly restricted information as to exactly what's been delivered and exactly where it's located. But also, I would say that you've also got to keep in mind that it's not just sort of the donated weapons that Ukraine has available. It also has quite capable indigenous missile and sort of kamikaze drone capability that has always been able to use on Russia. We've seen recent attacks not only on sort of oil facilities, but also in the last week or so on a couple of missile early warning radars fairly deep into Russia.
Right. What do you think made NATO leaders change their minds so quickly about arms deliveries to Ukraine? Was it this ongoing Russian offensive in Kharkiv region?
Yes, I think it was primarily driven by operational requirements. It obviously takes a while to get consensus agreement, particularly from the US. The US has a fairly unique position relative to Russia, not only as a member of NATO, but as the only great power member of NATO. So I think that yes, it's been protracted. But I think they've got what they want ultimately. I think there will be more movement in future in terms of weapons deliveries. Your colleague earlier mentioned the delivery of F-16s. I think next thing is probably going to be a discussion on what kind of ground attack missiles the F-16s are equipped with in order to sort of stand off from Russian air defences. So it's an ongoing conversation. It will continue to evolve. The NATO Secretary General, one of the messages he did was quite strongly in favour of putting out meeting today was that they are setting up for the long haul. They're expecting this to go on for several years. So they're probably which is why they're looking for a sort of multi-year financial commitment. So I think they've definitely got their minds in for the long haul now.
Mm-hmm. Well, just looking back at the beginning of that summit in Prague, when Stoltenberg read of a list of the countries that are already contributing the famed 2%, and, let's face it, those that still are not there. Are we to expect that the Washington summit will concentrate on that issue, or are you predicting any other issues that need to be touched upon in Washington?
Well, I think I remember writing about the NATO summit in Wales in 2014, and it's been the last decade or so has been a long, painful road to get the majority of NATO nations now to the 2% target. We're steadily getting there. I think we're approaching 2/3 of nations, which is a far better position than we were 10 years ago. There will, of course, be a sort of spectre at the July summit. In terms of NATO contributions, in terms of Donald Trump, he's been very vocal, and understandably so, in terms of getting Europe to sort of pay its sort of contribute to the collective defence of NATO. Beyond sort of the Ukraine angle, I think there are always issues to debate in terms of strengthening the direct defence of NATO. I think it's important to remember that that's the primary mission of the primary mission of the organisation, and there are other issues to consider. NATO's role in the Pacific, for example. I think we're just at the very early stages, for example, of seeing where NATO stands in terms of its obligations to defend sort of the United States and Canada in a potential conflict with China. So I think that's a conversation that we're going to be having over the coming years.
Right. Do you think we should expect any more crossing of those self-imposed red lines in Ukraine from the Biden administration before the presidential election in the US?
I think they will be very reluctant to do anything that will cause Ukraine to sort of rise in salience prior to the election. I wouldn't expect any attempt to get additional funding. There may be some slight tweaks to how the sort of the weapons they've supplied already can be operated. I mean, you've seen just one the last day or two. But I don't think that they're going to do anything that will sort of drastically change the game. Certainly not in terms of bringing NATO into an active role of defending even the far west of Ukraine. I think any sort of major adjustment in position will have to wait until after the US election. And it must be remembered that any shift may not necessarily be in Ukraine's favour, given the sort of the political climate.
Well, thank you, Mr. Allport, for that comprehensive explanation and summary of the NATO Prague summit.